Welcome everyone to the Coaches Lounge. I'm Jessica. We're here with Carla and Zafrana talking today about opinion versus truth, or rather the influence of opinion versus personal truth. So I think, this is kind of one of those topics that gets blown out of proportion quite quickly. And I feel like we kind of started that discussion a little bit before the show started. So would you like to pick up where we kind of left off there?
Yeah, Zafrana, you were saying something.
Well, I think it can become easily very loaded because opinion and truth become intermingled. So our opinion we think is truth, unless it's challenged. And that's where coaching becomes very, very interesting. So suppose you brought up one particular religion and it becomes your truth because that was how you were brought up. And then you grow up and you hear other opinions and you're like, no, I'm close to these opinions. It can't be anything else. And so it's just becomes very, very interesting, as in, how do we define like what's an opinion and what is truth? And is it just what's true for us and how we experience things? Or is it more objective? So I'm opening the floor for that.
Nice to open it. Yeah, go with your opinion. Let's go, Carla and Jessica. Yes. Let's have some fun here. Yeah, well, I think there's a lot more to it even because our opinion, who knows what his or her own opinion is, because it's already influenced basically with our DNA. When we're in our mom's womb, we already are influenced in our beliefs, so in our opinions, because the way how we believe certain things, subjects, whatever, is how we look at the world, is where we make our opinion, and that feels like it's our truth. So what is our truth? That's the first question to start with. And yeah, and whenever we do have our truth, wherever it came from, how easily are we influenced by other people, where we want to be feel safe, feel okay, want to live up to their standards, so we change our truth, all those kind of things. So it is a very complicated subject.
Well, it sounds like some of what you're saying is about personal truth that we're born with, which requires us to really truly know ourselves. So in the process of knowing ourselves, maybe we'll get in touch with our own intuition, what we're supposed to be doing on the planet, our purpose. If people even get that far, chances are they didn't, though. And what they're actually being influenced by is the media or supposed news or things that they want to believe in because it helps them feel safe. And a lot of our personal truths have to do with wanting us to serve us, to keep us safe in some way. It's the ego trying to fortify itself so that it has certain boundaries that it understands. And whenever someone challenges that belief in any form or fashion, then it's like a threat to the self, to the personal world. And that's why people have such drastic emotional reactions to these things. But the fact is that if you can Google it, then, and that thing, that what is it, collective or agreed upon truth from the internet is contrary to what we want to believe, then we're going to have to let go of the subjective truth in favor of a conscious, or like a construct that everyone else has agreed upon. So basically, we're either in consensus reality or we're outside of consensus reality, depending on your culture, where you happen to be living in that particular region. Because what is true in one country is not necessarily true in another country. So it's also
quite be the opposite.
Quite the opposite. So it's really important to be conscious of where you physically are in the world to know which beliefs are sort of accepted and which ones are not. But even then, if your personal inner truth, if you're born onto the planet with a different opinion than those that were surrounding you, then that's either A, because the universe is trying to get something else done in that particular area. Maybe the beliefs are off in that area. Or two, there's a lot of like social programming that has gone on that makes it such that one is just really stuck in tradition, and they believe that that is what is the truth. So it's really important to like decipher like what is working, what is not working. And ultimately, to some degree, a lot of the meditators would say just kind of go with it, go with whatever's going on there. To some degree, sometimes we really do have to oppose popular belief. Like we can look at Iran, for example, the woman that for whatever reason was not wearing her hijab, which was what was socially acceptable or the status quo in that country. And her personal belief was that she was done, and that cost her life, but it also led to social change. And so the question is, how important is that personal opinion? Because there have been entire countries that have been founded on personal opinion, and that personal opinion then became the law. So I think it's really important. If I were going, to challenge or not challenge, it's something more along the lines of what is your personal truth and how important is that to you? How far are you willing to go? Because the Karens out there clearly believe what they believe, and they're just rude.
Yeah.
So please, it's like, do define.
Well, it's interesting because you're getting into culture now, and it's what even creates a culture in a certain place. And it's funny because it's usually when something becomes normalized, that creates a culture in a place. And so then the more everyone starts to do it, then that's what's perpetuated. And so then it becomes normal. And so it's like a weird cycle of how it's created. So yeah, like you said, with the Karens of the world, and this is how maybe we started to abolish like things like racism, because there's a movement of enough people shifting into saying, hey, that we've had enough. But it takes one person starting it, and it takes the right conditions as well in an area, in a place where people have had enough, perhaps, or there's just a certain unsettlement and people want that change to happen. So I think there's cycles to all of this as well, in terms of where culture begins and when there's a time to change. And sometimes there's a strong opposing force as well, like you were saying with the hijab. I certainly know I've read about women in Saudi, like they're allowed to drive now, but for a long time, I think that was only a couple of years ago, they weren't even allowed to drive. But even then, it's not the culture for them to drive. So it's still seen as like, whoa, this is a little bit daring. Even though it's technically in the law, it's just not normalized yet. I think it takes enough women to be brave enough to make that movement before it becomes normalized, but it's not quite there yet. So there's always that time element to it, to create a culture and normalize what you want. But I love how you've added in, like, are you going to be the starter of creating change? Because that's where your own personal truth comes in, where you're thinking, I really don't like how this is set up, and I'm going to be brave enough to state my opinion. And even though it might be an unpopular opinion, to see how other people maybe respond to it. And then it takes like almost like a bit of a power as well to actually decide, I'm going to do something about this. And so there's all of that added into like, who creates the change in the first place? And I think it's momentum and shift and the kind of mood at the time and unsettling and all that kind of stuff shifts into it. But it's an interesting thing, because why did one person in that whole region where everything's the way it is decide to think differently in the first place? So where's that consciousness even coming from? And that's what I find very, very interesting. Like that consciousness is coming through us. And it's almost like when we talk about the universe, it's like, I think, is there some order to these things? And is it the right time, right place, right person? Because I'm sure there'll be a person who has different ideas and they're trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time and nothing happens from it. So we don't read about that person. But there's another person who's in the right place, right time, and then change does occur. So I think there's many elements to it. And it'd be interesting how many people feel like they're stuck in the wrong era.
Yeah, there's another factor too. I mean, even we can change our thought. I mean, with out of fear or out of anger. I mean, that's where change in our own mind can start, out of an experience, a lot of things, out of what we've seen on TV, and we are connecting some dots that other people are definitely not connecting the same way. And that story starts to lead its own way in your mind, and by repeating it, and that's how behavior, thinking, all these patterns start. The more you repeat it in the brain, whether you see it around you, that's how people can get easily hypnotized. I mean, they did a lot of research on that. And that way they can change their opinion, change their behavior, change their everything. So there's so many aspects working with this. And it's hard also to go even inside to search, like, who am I now and what's my opinion at this moment? Because that can change from today to tomorrow. And it's just like I had this young guy, he was 19, and he was like going in a certain direction with really opinions that belonged to that direction. Then he got depressed, and suddenly he was going another direction. And going that way, he figured out after a while that he just wasn't happy there. And that made him start thinking that he figured out, like, during my depression, I was afraid of certain things. And now I realize it brought me to a path that I'm not happy with. So now consciously, I have to go back to that old path. But he did live for a while in a path that he really thought, that is my opinion, that's how I think nowadays, that's what I want, that's my future. To realize, wait a minute, what went on, what was going on here? So, and that was not even influenced by other people. So it happens within us and it happens outside us. And especially in these times with all the news, I mean, all this news just keeps repeating. People start believing it, even if you don't want to believe it. A lot of people believe it just because of the repetition in their head. So where is our own opinion still?
Well, I think that in that particular scenario, those two scenarios, really, I think the second one where it's like the news, a lot of people want to be hypnotized. A lot of people want to give away their power. A lot of people don't want to think for themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to be told what to do because that feels safer than finding their own path. And they follow the formula for life, even though life is not technically linear. They follow it anyways because it helps them feel safe. And, ultimately, it takes a lot of courage to be a free thinker. It takes a lot of courage to be free, period. Regardless of whether one thinks that they're free or not, they may not have allowed themselves to do certain things because of the rules they put in their mind, or that society put in their mind, or the media. And so they're not really themselves. A lot of people go around in life not living, not really truly being themselves, and not having the courage to really explore further. So some of it is that a lot of people are not interested in being free or powerful.
Not even maybe aware they're not free or powerful.
Right. They're not aware. And that could be part of it. The other part is it might be beneficial to have everyone going in one direction for some select people. But I think in the case of like the person that you were talking about, where it's like they chose one life path and they chose another, I feel like that could be like, the story of everyone in their 20s. It could just be like a life phase thing. Like sometimes, you know, people are born, they have parents. It doesn't always come with a trauma-free zone. They do weird things in their 20s because they're working through that trauma, and they get to somewhere later on and like, what was I even doing? And they come back to their true self, whatever that is. And so I feel like in the process of like, you know, having a life coach is sometimes when those moments where someone can like sort of fact check to you and say, okay, well, are you really being yourself? Is this really what you want? You know, and it's like, we don't always have that sounding board with friends, because not, you know, not every friend is really the type of person that can speak to the truth or is interested in discovering that. A lot of times, you know, in order to like discover the truth, I think this is why we don't really get to that often within ourselves, is because in order to really get to the truth, we have to have conflict. There has to be a deciphering of what is this opinion versus this opinion. Are they both true, or is only one of them feels right? So in the sense of like, you know, friends and like personal truths, I feel like a lot of times it's tricky to get that personal discovery with a friend, because a lot of the times they're not really willing to call us out on what they know is not really us. They would rather keep the peace. They would rather, you know, keep things sort of at a status quo where there isn't conflict, because there's less friction, there's less social friction. Whereas, you
And
know,
at
a
least
life,
it's known.
yeah,
It's
everything
known.
is known.
Conflict is
Whereas
known, even if they don't like it, they know at least what they're up to, and that
it's
gives some
predictable.
sort of feeling of security.
A false, yeah, it's a feeling of security because you know where things will be. Whereas if a person changes,
Yeah.
good or bad, then there's no predictability. There's not necessarily a compatibility there. And a life coach's job is to really help a person chisel away at themselves and to determine what is really true for them. And that may not always be pleasant. It may not always keep the status quo. It means
A
they may
lot
not,
of times.
you know, they may not stay with the same person. They may not live in the same place. They may not have the same job or like financial situation because they're in the midst of change. So for people that don't like change, that's not going to be something they call their friends out on, because that's not what they really want at that moment.
It takes courage, and it takes a certain level of feeling secure enough inside that you're able to handle your life and to handle change, and then it's possible. But yeah, they do need help with that.
They do.
And to
And
handle whatever comes up as well. Like they think a lot of people, when it's this change, they think they're not going to be able to handle people's reaction or what they're going to say. So a lot of it is being able to have that strength within yourself to be like, I can handle any situation. Just adding to your point, Carla, there.
Yeah, but it's also that the brain sees every change as a big thing. And even that, that's a lot of other people say when somebody is changing, other people say like, oh, it's not a big deal. While the person itself, it's huge. This change, it's huge. It's big, and then other people like make it so small for them. They don't realize how big it is for that person, because our brain, as soon as you want to change something, and you said that earlier, Jessica, as soon as you want to change something, it's kind of panic, and it sees it as a huge problem,
it's a threat.
even though
Yeah.
it might be this small if you look at it from like an objective point. So, but
And
that's not how you.
realize that, you know, your change is threatening to other people. So if they hear about that change, maybe the reason that they're
So,
making it small is because they're threatened by it, because there's an aspect of them that was that. And if you're changing your opinion, then there's a possibility that maybe they're wrong. The ego doesn't like to be wrong, because then there's something either bad or negative or, you know, what have you, whatever they've attached to that. But I think, you know, change also, aside from like a personal inner strength, I think it also takes a certain of outer stability too, because, you know, if maybe the place that we're living isn't stable, or the job situation isn't stable, you know, root chakra stuff, if that isn't like taken care of, making changes on the upper level is not going to happen, because their, you know, basic needs are not are being threatened or not being met. So I feel like, some of it is that, there's a certain amount of stability that has to occur in like the rest of a person's life in order to support that change or level of instability in order to basically walk. I mean, change, like walking, is the essence of going from a stationary place. Maybe you're just standing, right? And then it requires some instability in order to take another step. You have to be somewhat off balance in order to move forward.
Yep.
And then, put the next foot down. So, if there's some level of balance that can like is continuous through that, like through that center of gravity, that center of self, that inner stability, what you were talking about, then yeah, I think that change can be a lot easier. But when we don't know who we are or where that inner courage comes from, then it's either really tricky or it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and besides that, it really also depends on the amount of stress, because in stress we make cortisol, and cortisol makes it has a side effect. It develops fear.
Mhm.
That's just a side effect of cortisol. So the more stress there is, the higher the fear will be with every change or whatever. So that's one reason I work always with my people with stress reduction, to keep that down, and then change, whatever change it is, it makes it so much easier to do.
Mhm.
Mm.
It's almost
We have,
effortless. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes. It depends on what motivates a human being to change in the first place. But most humans are motivated by, do I fit in my environment? And that's where we get the perpetuation of whatever's happening in the kind of current status quo. And also, how do I look to other people? So that idea of status as well. So these are big things that keep people exactly where they are. Exactly. And so it's like, if you really want to create change, you have to kind of almost look at these ideas of, can I normalize this for the other person so they still feel like they fit in? And I think a lot of fitting in is feeling like I'm safe, as you brought up earlier, Jessica, is that idea of feeling safe. But as we know with feelings, it's they're governed by our thoughts. So if you tell yourself, I'm really unsafe, oh my gosh, I'm doing things differently, and you start to think these looping thoughts about, oh my God, I'm doing things, people are going to look at me differently. Of course, you're going to feel unsafe. And this is where coaching is so effective. Like, we use even grounding techniques where we kind of bring you into that present moment, and then we help you to settle your thoughts and say, hey, what's a better way to think? Do you really want to think like this? Or do you want to shift it? And it takes practice and it takes some dedication, but you can create that safety for yourself within your mind as well. So that you feel like less stressed, as you were saying, Carla. Because when we're in stress and we're in fear response, we're not our best selves. We're just kind of going on autopilot, and we're just like almost in that fight or flight kind of situation. And we can't think logically from that place. So the key
Yep.
would be to kind of find your way of feeling safe within yourself using, I mean, there's a whole range of techniques. I'm sure you guys have loads that you guys use as well. But certainly on the kind of the superficial front is just some grounding exercises, even just few breaths and breathing work. And kind of literally even putting your hand on your heart and letting yourself, just telling yourself, I'm safe, because you really are. You actually are. Even if someone hates you, you're still safe, pretty much, give or take, depending on what country you're in. Because might not be as
I
safe in
like
some
this
countries as
one. Can
others.
you see it?
Keep calm, stay positive.
I just put that in their face. No.
I
So
think it is a good point though, because I feel like most of the world is still in survival mode.
Yep.
Most people are maybe, at this point in history, we have a lot more comforts than we used to, but it doesn't mean that neurologic programming has gone away, or that, in real reality, we're actually as well off as we look like we are. Because there can be a lot of underpinnings of instability that we either are aware of or not aware of, that are causing extra stress and tension, that make, it difficult to have an objective perspective or a truth-oriented opinion when trying to suss out those different thoughts are not necessarily a priority. It's sometimes,
Mhm.
easier to just go with what is. But yeah, I would
Mm.
say for sure, you know, giving ourselves moments to be calm, to be still, is going to be one of the most life-changing things that we do. Um, Opinions or not, some of the best things that we can do for ourselves is just to slow down.
And I think another part is also with, even if we would live an other's opinion, if we would change ours, I think a very important question is also to ask yourself, am I happy with this?
Hmm.
I mean, it's not always bad to take on for a while or totally somebody else's opinion and change yours. The question is, are you okay with that? Are you happy with that? Is it adding to your life, or is it taking things out of your life that you usually like or love? And so I think that's a good question to ask whenever you encounter that you are changing or you're influenced by other opinions, things like that. Because
Yeah,
that's
is it a
what I
good
see a lot.
influencer?
Would
Yeah,
say,
it's like, is it a good influence or not? Like,
yeah.
if someone is very positive, and maybe, we're a little depressed, is it a good thing to start adopting some of their thought patterns or beliefs? Because, maybe that just makes us happier. Ultimately, it may not matter in every case. It may not matter what the exact truth is, but if it
Mhm.
makes us happy, then why not just go with it or try it on for a while, see how it goes? Because there are some truths out there that are not really easy to research. And so some
Mhm.
of them are is just like, well, do you like it or not? Is it serving you? Does it make you happier? Is it making your life better? Or is it making it more difficult? And I think maybe that can be the value criteria, if it's not always an objective truth, something we can Google or research
Sure.
or read about, because
And
there's a lot of those.
sometimes it's good when it's a little bit more difficult, because that's where you start thinking and start looking for other solutions or other ways to live your life or whatever, to change something, whatever. So yeah, so it's basically altogether a very complicated thing.
And
I'd
definitely, I
also,
think I think making things like more, like having critical thought is a skill. And it's a skill that everyone is, it's almost like a divine skill, really, because critical thinking can get you to truths that may not have any proof yet, but that you can go research and find the proof for and discover that that is actually true. But critical thinking is one of those things that can get a person out of a lot of either negative thoughts or even social opinions, because the truth, the ultimate truth, the capital the truth is out there, and we can know it if we really are dedicated to knowing what that is, whether it's a personal truth or a factual truth. Scientists wouldn't do what they do if there weren't absolute truth to be had. Not to say that it's necessarily the way to go about it, but critical thinking will get you there.
well, I feel
One
like
way or another.
we add a lot of critical thinking in coaching as well. We ask things like, why do you think that? Where did you first learn that?
Mhm. Is
And
it really
whose
true?
opinion do you really think it is? So we look at objectivity within our coaching practices. That's just part of coaching. But I'd also add, because you said earlier on that, does it make you happy? I'd also add to that, just as a caveat, and does it hurt other people? So I was
Yeah.
listening to something the other day where I
Mhm.
think you had kind of some sort of, I think it was some Christians in America who believed that only, they were clearly very racist, and they were like, only white people are going to come back to America. And there was, I don't know, some sort of show, like, I don't know, one of those talk shows, and the host was very much like, but we weren't the first ones here. It was Native Americans, and they're not even white. And that was a very inconvenient truth. They were like, nope, it says it in the Bible, full stop, that's it. And clearly it made them happy and their community happy, because they felt like they were
Uh-huh.
fitting in and they were doing the right thing. And so, but then they wanted everyone who was non-white to leave the country and go back to their homeland. So it does it hurt other people. I would just add that little thing into there as well, because sometimes what makes you happy it hurts a lot of people. So just adding
Yeah,
that
I
one
like
in.
that add-on. Thank you. That's a very, very nice one. Yeah, because a
Well,
lot of
but
times we don't
even in that
realize it.
context, I feel like they're probably really not happy. If they're really looking at, if they're arguing that level, that's stress. It might be exciting. It could be it could be labeled as exciting. But I don't know. Happiness is one of those effortless things. I mean, it definitely, I think there are a lot of people, I feel like there are people that they imagine something is beneficial for them, where if they really look at it, it's actually causing them a lot of stress.
Yeah, but they
It
don't
becomes
realize that.
They're used
Well,
to
they
it
don't
though.
realize that.
It's like mowing the lawn, for example. Does anyone really like mowing the lawn? Some people really do. They really do like being out there. They love it. But other people
I do.
mow the lawn because it's the socially accepted thing, and they, maybe it makes them happy in the sense that it's done. But do they like doing it? Like, I don't know. Washing the dishes, like sometimes you have to really look at it. Like maybe they like the thing being completed because it's like some sort of expectation. But yeah, I think it is. I
That's a
think
good
it's.
one to ask yourself, because I know a lot of all the ones that you just mentioned. I all love them.
I don't
I have
mind,
good
but
memories, and I have it gives me peace when I do that, and I just love it. And
it's very
so, yeah,
sensory, right? Like you're outdoors in the sunshine if you're mowing the lawn. If
yeah,
you're
that's
doing
yeah.
the dishes, you're feeling water and temperature on your hand. It can be fun. Kids don't always see it that way, like it depends.
Yeah, that's why. What's the story you tell
What's the
yourself around
story?
whatever situation? So
Yeah.
and yeah, change that story. But are you still happy, and is it not threatening to somebody else?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
I
we
think
keep changing stories all the time.
some truths can feel very inconvenient to people because it changes. So it feels like once they know it's there, they have to then do something about it, because knowing something and still doing nothing about it is true ignorance. So ignorance is where you haven't even heard of this shift or this change. But
Mhm.
when you've heard about it, so someone's actually telling you, you're like, oh, don't tell me, because now I might actually have to do something, because now
Yeah.
I'm living knowing there's another way, knowing I can handle my stress better, knowing that I can kind of overcome my childhood trauma and then not live in an effect of it anymore. And they're like, oh, but that requires me to change it. I don't want to. And
Yeah.
like even recently had a potential client, and she got such an insight from our session, and then she was like, you know what, like she talked to her husband, she was like, I don't want the coaching because I'm so overwhelmed. And I was thinking, but that's why you need the coaching, because it helps with your overwhelm. The fact is, she wanted to keep her overwhelm because it's just become a part of her identity and who she believes she is. And she knows if I tell her if we coach towards a different way, she might not be overwhelmed anymore. And then
I have to
what?
do
Like then,
something about it. Oh
yeah,
no.
that's
That's
it.
where also the
Oh
victim role
no.
comes in. Do you want to
So
stay with it?
that's exactly it. So truth is like being almost in alignment with reality without all these extra barriers being up and your kind of conditioned responses, and to actually take that pause and think and be able to kind of objectively respond. So it's kind of taking some thought, towards what you're doing. And I think that people just want to live how they've always lived, as we were previously saying. They don't want to change because it's difficult. It feels difficult and it feels overwhelming sometimes. And that can be scary. So they'd rather stay in their opinion, even though it's actually more uncomfortable. But they don't know it's uncomfortable because they've never experienced the other side.
And change is even more uncomfortable because you don't know what the outcome is, and you don't know how that feels or what it brings you. And so that's even more what we don't want them. A lot of people don't want them.
And I feel like there's also times when our happiness gets in the way of other people's expectations. So even if we're making that change, there's sometimes the opinion from other people where it's like, well, why do you have to be that way now? It's like, it's like the 3-year-old playing on the swing set. Like they're having a great time, but might they be annoying some other person that's like sitting on the sidelines? Like, why do they have to be so happy? Like, God, children. And I think like a lot of times, sometimes our own happiness, our own playfulness, or like being on our own truth isn't always accepted by those around us. And it's not really because we're hurting them per se, it's just our own personal freedom shines a light on how they're not being themselves. And that's what's really grating on them. And that's a personal opinion, right? Because it's, causing true harm is usually either intentional or it's like a trauma response. It's like a pattern conditioning of harm that causes more harm or like personal internal harm. But if our personal truth is one of those things where it just sort of lights up the world and somebody's upset about that, well, it's like being upset that somebody turned on a light bulb in a dark room. It's, it is what it is.
That's
Are we going
projection,
to be upset
right?
that suddenly that now we can see the whole room is dirty? Like, turn off the light again.
That feels like when people say, no, don't help me. That's exactly what it feels like. They don't want to see the dirty room.
I'm going to see it's dirty.
Well, a lot of people are really afraid of the light.
They are.
So it is. But I'm looking at the time, even though we could speak for another hour or whatever, even longer. But we're already busy for like 40 minutes. So I'm asking, is there anybody who has like a tip for somebody or something else still to say? I think it's good to wrap it up.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to, personal truth versus, the influence of other people's opinions, I would say that, always look for your own personal knowing, your own connection with yourself, maybe with the larger universe, but really get to know what is true for you. And when other people's opinions come in, because they will, um, either take it because that's really a part of you, or let it go because it's not. And being okay to let go of those people, those places, those things that really don't serve you. And if you need help with that process, reach out to someone that can really do that, that can really hold you accountable to yourself, whether that's a friend or a coach or a therapist or, some kind of like mentor, somebody that can really help you with your own personal truth and stick to it, because that's the only way you're going to be happy. And you can only really truly live for you.
Yeah. So I would say, with the topic being truth versus opinion, I would say always challenge your own opinions and your thoughts, especially as you come into early adulthood and you're starting to become your own person and not just someone's child. And you kind of doing things this one way, and maybe it's leading to fights or it's leading to I don't know, just things feeling more difficult. I'd always question. It's called, I think, Socratic questioning, where you literally go down to the root cause of things, like why am I doing this? What's going on? And you ask why several times going down, and you keep answering to figure out, why am I doing this? What's really driving this behavior? And also, where did this even come from? And is this something I want to keep? And really asking that question so that you can start to find that essence of who you are, not just what someone brought you up to be. And you might want to keep a whole bunch of things, but you might want to change a few things. And though it feels scary to do that sometimes, and like people might say you're too different now, you don't fit in with the family, I would say embrace the differences between us. And if someone doesn't accept you for who you truly are because you're trying to find your own truth, then maybe they're not the right person to be in your life anyway. And just adding that kind of little reasoning in there for people to ponder over. And Carla?
I would say observe yourself And if you find out that you are changing your truth, your opinion, your behavior a lot of times because other people say or what you think they think about you, if they say something different, observe if you follow their path very easily. And if you do, ask yourself, how strong am I in my opinions, in my way of living, in my way of thinking, and how okay am I with that? Or am I seeking attention? Am I seeking love? Am I seeking something like being trusted, whatever, in somebody else? And if you figure out that you do that a lot or very, very regularly, go and seek, some help, people who can make you stronger so you feel stronger and you can stay with what you want because that's what you're happy with.
Mm. Thank you so much, ladies, for all of these
Yeah,
wonderful tips and tricks.
same to you. And I would say, well, we'll see you all next week again. Thank you very
Bye.
much for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.